If it's Tuesday, new fallout, growing frustration, and mounting questions. The White House battles a growing spotlight over classified documents found at President Biden's home and former office. Plus, New Mexico authorities arrest a failed Republican candidate, alleging he was the mastermind behind a series of politically motivated shootings. We'll speak with the lead prosecutor in the case ahead. And everything we know about the new COVID variant coined the Kraken. It's spreading across the U.S. as concerns mount over what's really happening with China's deadly outbreak. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where the Biden administration appears to be in damage control mode as it faces mounting questions and frustrations about the classified documents found at Mr. Biden's D.C. office and Delaware home, which are now the subject of a special counsel investigation. The White House currently finds itself tangled in a PR nightmare, having to balance an ongoing criminal investigation with calls for more transparency after a week of rolling disclosures about what was discovered, where it was found, and when. For the first time, the White House counsel's office held a call with reporters today to try to address some of those questions, but they provided little in the way of new information. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre faced questions about her own credibility, as well as the president's confidence in his team at this afternoon's briefing.
On Friday, you stood here, though, and were asked about these documents issued by our account some 18 times. At that point, the president's lawyers had found these 5 additional pages of classified documents. So did you not know on Friday that those documents had been found when you were at the podium, or are you being directed by someone to not be forthcoming on this issue?
I have been forthcoming from this podium. What I said yes to was what the statement at the time that we all had. Right, you all had the statement, and I was repeating what the council was sharing at that time. Right,
we had that statement, so we knew what was in it. But you also knew. Did you not know that?
I'm telling you, I just answered the question.
Does President Biden have confidence in the way his team is handling this, with this trickle out of information and the documents being found day after day?
I can tell you this: the president has confidence. I can tell you this: that the president and his team rightfully took action when they learned that the documents existed.
This comes after the president, for a 5th day in a row today, chose not to answer shouted questions from reporters, this time during an Oval Office appearance alongside the Prime Minister of the Netherlands.
So will you commit to speak to the special counsel?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's go. Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you very much.
As we reported yesterday, sources tell NBC News President Biden is growing frustrated with his administration's response to this developing story, particularly when it comes to his team's failure to better contrast his handling of sensitive government information with that of former President Trump. Instead, the White House has been dogged by questions of transparency, including why it took more than 2 months to disclose the first discovery of classified documents. And the scrutiny around their handling of the matter is not going away anytime soon, not with an ongoing special counsel, not with reporters searching for answers, and especially not with Republicans in control of the House. Joining me now to discuss all of this is the great panel that we have here. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memley, who's been all over this story. Also with us is Atlanta Journal-Constitution Washington correspondent Tia Mitchell, Democratic pollster and NBC News political analyst Cornell Belcher, and Republican strategist and NBC News political analyst Rick Tyler. Thanks to all of you for being here. Mike, I want to start with you. We have been reporting for days on the frustration that President Biden feels and also the frustration among his allies. Did we see a tiny change in strategy today?
It's interesting, Kristen, because we saw the White House do something today, which they hadn't done in, I know it's only been a week, but it feels like a lot longer, a lifetime in politics, which is really punch back for the first time. Yes, we had Karine at the podium with that frustrating and familiar script about what she can't answer. But we did hear from the White House counsel's office, Ian Sams, the spokesperson, both offering a more fulsome explanation for why they can't answer the questions that we've been asking them now for 5 days, but also to point the finger back at the Republicans, to accuse House Republicans who are now launching additional investigations in addition to the ones they were already mobilized for, to say that they didn't say a peep when President Trump had a similar, but in their view also very different situation involving classified documents. And so it's taken a while, but it's very clear that the White House now, at least is comfortable engaging in a political fight where the legal fight is one that they're still keeping very hands-off for at the moment.
Cordell, you have your finger on the pulse of this as well. In your conversations with Democrats, what are they saying to you about what the response has been so far? And as Mike is pointing out, they're punching back today. That is not insignificant. Do you think that it's a forceful enough and aggressive enough strategy, though?
Well, you'll see it unfold over the next week or so, right? This is such a classic storm of a story, Washington insider storm of a story, because out in middle America, they're not having this conversation at all, right? So we're making a storm of a story for political purposes, and I get it, because I'm a political hack. I get the political purpose behind this. But the idea that these are equivalent is just flat out wrong.
They might not be equivalent, but here you have two similar headlines. They're now both under investigation.
And who's creating the headlines, right? We know they're not at all equivalent. One group took documents, knowingly took documents, defied a subpoena around these documents, wouldn't give these documents back. The other one's like, oh, we have these documents, let's give them back. They weren't asked for these documents. They gave these documents back, and they're trying to. But look. The drip of documents is a problem. I get it. But these stories are not at all equivalent. And I think over the next couple of weeks, you're going to see the White House and allies talk about the differences between the two.
Yeah, I think it's true. They're not the same. But there are people at home that are paying attention, and to them, the root of the issue is the same. President Trump had classified documents that he shouldn't have had. Now they're hearing President Biden also had classified documents in his possession when he was out of office that he shouldn't have had. So for them, it is a headache. No, it's not the #1 story that's, keeping them up at night. But for them, they're saying, what is President Biden doing? It's the same thing we were angry at President Trump about just a few months ago. Now it looks like he was doing the same thing. And that's the issue, because that's what people at home are saying.
Well, then isn't it our job? I play media guy. Sometimes I'm a pollster. But then isn't it our job as the media to explain what the differences are? And quite frankly, we have not done a very good job
I
of
think
that.
the media is trying to bend over backwards trying to explain the difference.
I have to say, I do think there has been an effort to, and the White House has been very clear, let's make the distinction to give the White House its due when they make that argument. But Rick Tyler, Republicans wasted no time jumping all over this. Do you think that they run the risk of looking hypocritical? Because they did not go after former President Trump's handling of classified documents. And we're talking about, again, hundreds of documents.
Of course they look hypocritical, as Biden looks hypocritical, as I think his quote was, how could this happen? How could someone be so irresponsible, referring to Trump? And then here he is in the same situation. And I do have to disagree. Somebody removed documents that were found in Mr. Biden's possession in his school office and at home where they weren't supposed to be. That is not fundamentally different than what happened with Trump. I'm not defending either one of them. Classified documents should be handled well, but it shouldn't be, well, they're completely different because Mr. Biden had them or Mr. Trump had them. They are, at its root, the same. They were among personal possessions. Trump was, among Burger King wrappers and bubble gum, and Biden was next to his Corvette in the garage.
No, a subpoena makes them different. A subpoena and obstruction of
that's after the fact. But that's after the fact.
Well, but we also
can compound the crime.
No, well, again, I'm glad you went to crime because when you got a subpoena for something and then you defy that subpoena, then you get then it's obstruction of justice. There's none of that here. So no, I'm not going to allow anyone around this table to sort of put out this equivalency when it's fundamentally wrong.
Tia, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, there is a chance that Republicans overplay their hand here because there are differences. The volume of documents, the perception that President Trump did not cooperate when he was asked to turn over the documents that he had, that is a difference with President Biden. That doesn't negate the fact that at the core, we're still talking about classified documents that neither one of them should have had in their position. But that's where Republicans have to be careful with these investigations and these inquiries.
Mike, and you have some new reporting on.
Yeah, we have some new information because one of the key differences as well between the Trump team and the Biden team is just how careful the Biden team is being. You're not seeing, flippant tweets talking about what is being potentially looked at here. And our colleague Ken Delaney is now reporting on an interesting dynamic here because the White House explanation today for why they can't be more transparent is because they see it as interfering in an ongoing Justice Department investigation. Well, Ken Delaney is now reporting, based on a law enforcement source, that there has been no directive from the Justice Department, from the special counsel's office, telling them that they can't answer some of the very basic questions that we at the White House are trying to ask on a daily basis. And so this is, I think, the White House, both by convenience, but by their interpretation of what interference would look like, and the firewall that President Biden has been clear about since before when he was a candidate, that he's going to have independence between the DOJ and the White House. And now DOJ is saying, well, you can say more if you want.
That's not insignificant. I mean, Cornell, hearing that from DOJ, because, by the way, we've been saying to the White House almost on a daily basis, are you not answering these questions because the Justice Department has told you not to answer these questions? I mean, what could the potential impact of that be, particularly as we are talking about the possibility of President Biden announcing he wants to run for re-election sometime soon?
I think if we've watched the last couple of speeches that President Biden has given, especially the one at Ebenezer, I think he's already launched his presidential. I think he's already
That's a fair point.
I think he's already launched it. But look, I think the drip, and we know this. It's the drip, right? But they're caught in a tough place because you know, if they held back and said, well, let's wait till we get all the documents and see if all the documents are there, well, then guess what we'd be doing today? We'd be attacking. Why didn't you put them all out? Why didn't you let us know when you did? So it's really a no-win situation here. I think, again, we're going to have to push back on the being these things being the same. But it's a tough situation that the White House is in.
All right, I want to go to Capitol Hill and Ali Vitale and just get the reaction there to all of these latest developments. And just to underscore what Mike just said, the Justice Department now coming out and saying, look, they haven't told the White House that they can't answer some of these very basic questions. Ali, you've been tracking the strategy in Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill. What are they telling you at this hour? Where does this controversy stand?
Look, my question, Kristen, and I did pose this on the call that we did with the White House today with Ian Sams, a spokesperson for the counsel's office, is, okay, I see the way that you guys are dealing with the press questions on this, but what does it mean when it comes time to either go along with the requests that Republican committee heads are already making, or are you going to stonewall on that front? I didn't get a clean answer. There was sort of this comment about we do want to work with Congress when it's done in good faith, but then a lot of work to show that these inquiries are not being made in good faith. I think it's really important that you guys point out that they are now going into a sort of offensive posture on this against the Republicans who are trying to lead the investigations. And I think that's probably the dynamic that we're going to see here over the course of the next few months. This White House, I know that you guys around the table who cover it know this well, they were prepared for this Congress to be one where oversight and investigation were the main focal points, and that they were going to be facing a lot of inquiries from Republicans in Congress. They did not anticipate that this was going to be the first interlude of that and that this was going to be the focus. But nevertheless, they were staffed for this. They were ready for this. You can see it in the ways that they're already attacking the people who are doing the letter writing and the question asking from a committee perspective, going after people like the Oversight Chairman James Comer, Jim Jordan, and others. It's going to be really important because we're going to try to watch them add the context around each of these inquiries time and again. And I do think that the point that Cornell makes is an important one, which is that there are distinctions here, but for Republicans, the more that they can muddy the waters and equate these two instances of document having, the better for them. I think the catch, and you guys have alluded to this too around the table, is that when Republicans go at Biden for having these documents and being lax with where he kept them, they inevitably will have to engage on the Trump of it all, the fact that he did that. And of course, we also don't know the intent behind this yet either. That's going to be one of the really important questions. What did Biden know about these documents versus we know that former President Trump has gone so far as to say, well, I declassified these documents, which does sort of imply that he knew they were there in the first instance. So that's one of the key questions, too, that we're going to have to watch as we get more information on this, hopefully.
Yeah, great perspective from Capitol Hill. Ali Vitale, thank you. And Ali mentioned James Comer. I want to play a little bit of what he had to say and just get everyone's reaction on the other side. Take a listen.
With respect to investigating President Trump, there have been so many investigations of President Trump. I don't feel like we need to spend a whole lot of time investigating President Trump because the Democrats have done that for the past 6 years. So no one's been investigated more than Donald Trump. Who hasn't been investigated is Joe Biden. And that's why we're finally launching an investigation of Joe Biden. The House Oversight Committee, one investigation, and I hope to have it wrapped up as soon as possible.
Rick, what do you make of that? answer that we heard from Comer? Does it muddy the waters?
I don't know. I think it's worrisome. I think most people, as we started this conversation with, is that this is not on the top of people's agenda. And people worry that what is Congress going to do about very significant issues about inflation, gas prices, jobs, stability in the economy, 401ks, the recent economic outlook, which is very terrible. And instead, we're going to put the Republicans in charge of Congress to investigate a Democratic administration in response to the Democrats had just finished. And I think it's very worrisome, and it's not sustainable.
Well, to your point about wanting to get something done, one of the things that the Treasury Secretary says they have to get done is raise the debt ceiling. Kevin McCarthy was asked about this. The White House has said they're not going to negotiate. This is something we have to get done. Here's what Kevin McCarthy had to say.
We're 6 months away. Why wouldn't we sit down now and change this behavior? That we would put ourselves on a more fiscally strong position. It would make the future generation, make our nation stronger, make the economics and stronger for this country. Let's sit down. He's the president. We're the majority in the House. The Democrats are the majority in the Senate. And let's, exactly the way the founders designed Congress to work, find the compromise and find the common sense compromise that puts us back onto a balanced budget.
Tia, we've covered debt ceiling fights before. Is this moment different? And what do you hear when you listen to the speaker say that?
I mean, what I hear the speaker saying is what I think a lot of Americans believe and think, and, let's get government spending in order. Let's reduce our national debt. Let's bring down the deficit. All those things sound great, but it's easier said than done. So I think what the Democrats and probably even the Republicans in the Senate are saying is, okay, go ahead, Kevin McCarthy, get your Republican majority, get it together, get with your Freedom Caucus members, get with your moderates, and see what you can handle. That is the true test.
Kristen, the White House may not have been prepared for this fight over classified documents that they're engaged in now. They've been ready for this one for some time.
That's a very good
President Biden, in the midterm stump speech that he was delivering out across the country, was attacking Republicans preemptively for wanting to slash Social Security entitlement programs, all of which are going to be potentially on the menu of what Republicans say they want. As casual as Kevin McCarthy looked at it just a few minutes ago this morning,
very relaxed.
That's, I think, part of the strategy for the White House here, too, which is, A, we're not negotiating at all. They remember what it was like in the Obama administration to try to have this be a negotiating point. But secondly, they don't want to negotiate on their own because they know Kevin McCarthy is going to struggle mightily, to your point, to get 218 votes behind something as an attachment to the debt ceiling increase. And so they feel like they have the political upper hand for now, but this is going to be very real crisis potentially this summer.
It really could be. Cornell, what are you hearing in terms of the level of concern that this time is different, that this time the country could go over the cliff?
I mean, look no further than what you hear from Wall Street, right? And you hear what's coming out of Bank of America. There are real concerns that we're going to get to the brink on this and it could collapse our economy, right? So the ideal that we're going to, that Republicans are now going to try to extort things that they want out of our government by this means by which they could not do politically is, I think it's really problematic. I think this does give the White House an opportunity to go on the defensive, on the offensive with House Republicans in a way that I think is going to be catastrophic, especially as we come closer to this debt ceiling, especially as Wall Street gets more jittery and their 401ks begin to sort of sink again. It's going to be real problematic.
This is the first critical test for Speaker McCarthy. Rick, how do you see it playing out?
I think it's definitely a critical test, and I disagree with using the debt ceiling to negotiate decreased spending, which I would like to see for certain. And the Republicans would argue there aren't many. I think Chip Royce said today there aren't many leverage points, and this is one of them. Remember, raising the debt ceiling is simply raising the money that Congress has already spent. This is not new spending. But there are a lot of things that are not correct about this debate. One is this would not be the first time America has defaulted on its debt. It would actually be the fifth time America has defaulted on its debt. And I believe, and checking with constitutional scholars, that it doesn't matter if the Congress passes the debt limit or not. The Treasury Secretary is obligated by the 14th Amendment, Section 4, to recognize and pay debt. So the Biden administration has a responsibility in this, too. If the Congress does nothing, which would be derelict, the Treasury Secretary still must pay, as a first obligation, debts and interest payments and bonds. She cannot decide not to pay those. That would be unconstitutional.
We're at time, but just
I just think that still has a lot of risk at destabilizing the financial markets.
And we saw that during former President Obama's administration when they got so close to the cliff that actually the country's rating was downgraded.
Rick's arguing constitutional law.
Well, it was a fascinating conversation from beginning to end. Thank you all, Mike, Tia, Cornell, and Rick. Really appreciate it. Coming up, the disturbing new details behind a series of shootings targeting New Mexico Democrats that authorities say were the work of an election-denying Republican. That reporting and my one-on-one interview with the newly appointed district attorney prosecuting the case next. Plus, President Biden prepares to tour California's devastation as the storm clouds finally break after weeks of severe weather. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. We turn now to a string of shootings in New Mexico that officials say were the result of a politically motivated election denier. Local authorities yesterday arrested and charged Solomon Pena, a failed 2022 candidate for the New Mexico State House. He faces 15 counts, including conspiracy and criminal solicitation, after he allegedly paid 4 men to shoot at the homes of 2 county commissioners and 2 state legislators. Thankfully, no one was injured in any of those incidents. In a press conference yesterday, the Albuquerque police chief said Pena is believed to be the, quote, mastermind behind the shootings, which spanned a month from December 4th to January 3rd. Investigators also believe Pena was present for at least one of them. Following the election this November, Pena confronted at least 3 county commissioners and a state senator at their homes with paperwork falsely claiming that his election was rigged. Pena also tweeted a photo of himself after the election in a red Make America Great Again sweatshirt, writing, quote, I never conceded. NBC's Garrett Hake has more on Pena's arrest.
President Pena will be held without bond, and when you read the charging documents here, the warrant for his arrest, it's not hard to see why. There are chilling details in here of this shooting spree and what police say was a conspiracy to do it here, including one of the victims whose 10-year-old daughter came into her room in the middle of the night and said she thought she felt something on her face and that it felt sandy in her bed. She asked to sleep with her mother. The next morning, the two of them went back into the little girl's room and discovered bullet holes in the wall. That sandy feeling was from plaster, sawdust from the bullet holes going through the daughter's room into the bed. As a parent, it's just terrifying. And that's what these Democratic lawmakers in New Mexico were subjected to here. And it really is part of a larger trend we're seeing of this kind of increasing political violence and threats against lawmakers. Now, the Capitol Police Chief briefed Congress late last year describing the threat environment as the worst he'd ever seen. He said in 2021, the last year they had the statistics complete, there were 9,000 threats against members of Congress. It's a massive uptick year over year over year that we're continuing to seeing. And in many cases, lawmakers are now fitting the bill for additional security out of their own pockets. $10,000 here, $20,000 there. Some lawmakers spending upwards of $100,000 to supplement their own security. Now, lawmakers are provided with some budget for security, but some feel like it's just not enough. There aren't enough Capitol Police officers to go around. There aren't enough resources. And that's for members of Congress who are going to have significantly more resources at their disposal than would state-level lawmakers like these folks in New Mexico or at any other state capital around the country. So I think this is clearly a recurring threat. It's a cultural threat that is now baked in. The idea that at least threats, if not violence itself, has now become culturally and socially acceptable to some when their political needs are not being met. And you're seeing this on both sides of the aisle, although, again, the kind of right-wing, nationalist, election-denying brand is what we see here in this incident in New Mexico, and what does seem to be most on the upswing and kind of most traceable to one specific consistent ideology. If you're taught to believe, if you are told that an election is stolen and the very democratic process is at threat, and if you really believe that, it's not hard to see how someone might somehow kind of escalate into that violent zone here. So that's what we're seeing at the state level, what we're seeing at the national level. There's been somewhat of an effort here on the Hill over the last year or so to try to lower the temperature with this rhetoric. But as you well know, Kristen, it only takes one or two comments or tweets to jack it right back up again and keep that threat environment for our elected officials so high.
Incredibly disturbing. Garrett Haake, thank you so much for that report. I want to now bring in newly appointed New Mexico District Attorney Sam Bregman. Thank you so much for joining me, District Attorney Bregman. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I want to just get you to respond to what we heard from Garrett Haake. You heard him talk about the uptick in political violence. What was your reaction to hear that it had happened in your own community?
It's terrifying. It should never be terrifying for an elected official to be an elected official, but yet we're seeing more of this across the country, and we saw it here in Albuquerque. And it's terrifying for the people involved. I mean, today the legislature starts in New Mexico, right? I mean, obviously this is the talk going through the legislature. Instead of greeting their fellow legislators and starting the business of the people, they're having to worry about the safety for themselves and for their family. And, you know, an attack on an elected official is an attack on democracy. And it is really troubling to see this uptick. Whether or not it's a Republican or a Democrat, it does not matter. The fact that somebody is going to try and try violence as a political speech in some way is just so unacceptable. And we're going to hold this individual and the others involved responsible in a court of law.
And I'm glad you make that point. This is something that cuts across the political spectrum. Let's talk about the suspect in this case, Mr. Pena. Is he speaking with investigators? Is he cooperating?
I can tell you that he is in custody right now, and he's lawyering up, as the saying goes, which is entitled to. And of course, he's innocent until and unless he's proven guilty in a court of law. But we feel like we have the pieces of the puzzle at this point. The investigation is, by the way, the Albuquerque Police Department did a tremendous job on this, and I'm very grateful to them for the work they did. The detectives and our office works night and day with them on search warrants and other things. We believe we have, obviously, the evidence to prosecute this individual who really was, as the chief said last night, the mastermind of trying to strike fear in the hearts and minds of elected officials because he didn't like the outcome of an election. And that is just unacceptable. And we'll do everything we can to bring him to justice and make sure that they are brought to justice.
There are already 15 charges against him. Is it possible that we could see more charges and more serious charges brought against him?
Possibly. We'll see it
what would that look like? What would those additional charges potentially be?
Well, right now, just to be clear, he's a felon in possession of a firearm he's been charged with. He's been shooting at an occupied dwelling ×4. He is shooting from a motor vehicle ×4, if you will. Attempted aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, 4 conspiracy counts, criminal solicitation. There's, as you have up on the screen, there is a number of charges, and we'll see if there's more coming or not. But
could a charge be attempted murder? Would you charge him with attempted murder, given that he's shooting into people's homes?
Well, that
Allegedly?
may arise. We're going to continue to finish out the investigation, but we know one thing: the ringleader's in custody. It's our belief at this point of this, and we know who the others involved are as well.
And just, can you give us a sense, what gives you your confidence? You say basically you have him. Is there one piece? I mean, I know, yeah, understandable.
You know how we are, prosecutors. We don't want to compromise. This is early on, but my review of the evidence, we wouldn't bring charges if we weren't confident of these charges. But we're confident that we have the evidence necessary, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure he is held answerable to this, because it's just so unacceptable.
And give us a sense of what to expect. Solomon Pena is going to be appearing in court tomorrow. What should we expect to see?
Tomorrow afternoon is the arraignment. A pretrial detention motion will be filed very, very soon in the near future to keep him in custody. I imagine we'll probably have him on a track 3, which in our terms means probably trial within a year, hopefully.
We understand that he visited some of the homes that were targeted prior to these shootings. Did that raise a red flag for authorities? If not, why? And was anything missed here that could have prevented these shootings? And again, no one was injured. We want to stress that, but it could have been a lot worse.
No, I don't think necessarily that somebody missed the ball here. He was, we have a citizen legislature and elected officials in the county of Bernalillo that are county commissioners that were someone walks up to their door and knocks on it and then starts talking about how he should have won an election. Obviously, that may have brought some concern, but I don't think anybody missed it and saying, "Oh my gosh, this was going to happen." Nobody could have predicted what this guy was doing, but I think we've begun to solve these issues here.
And just very quickly, there are 2 other shootings that targeted state officials, but that have not yet been tied to Pena. What's the status of those investigations? Do you anticipate there will be a link determined?
I don't know. We don't have one yet at this point, but there are investigations involving those and any other acts of violence in Bernalillo County. I mean, that's what we do, and that's what the police department does a very good job at, and we're going to continue to investigate all leads that we may have. So we can't tie those other 2 yet, but we'll see.
All right, District Attorney Sam Bregman, thank you so much for your perspective and for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up next, Chinese officials claim the recent massive and deadly COVID outbreak has finally peaked after killing at least 60,000 people in just a few weeks. The latest from Beijing, as well as new COVID concerns at home, next. But first, in today's Meet the Press Minute, here's a look back at President Richard Nixon after he left office, reflecting on his history-making trip to China in 1972.
How do you think you'll be remembered? You're a pretty good judge. You read a lot of history. Write me a paragraph that might be written around the turn of the century and the next century about Richard Nixon.
I would say that as people look back on the Nixon administration, they're probably most likely to remember 50 years from now, 100 years from now, that it made a difference on a very major issue. We changed the world. If it had not been for the China Initiative, which only I could do at that point, we would be in a terrible situation today, with China aligned with the Soviet Union and with the Soviet Union's power. The China Initiative hasn't brought peace to the world. We can't be sure what will happen, but without it, we would be in a terrible shape.
Welcome back. China is finally sharing what it says is the death toll from a recent massive COVID surge in December, reporting that nearly 60,000 people died in just a matter of weeks. It's a sharp increase from Beijing's previous official totals, but still far fewer than many experts believe the toll to be. Now, it comes after international calls for transparency following China's abrupt end to its strict zero COVID policy and ahead of the busy Lunar New Year travel season. NBC's Janice Mackey-Freyer is on the ground with the very latest.
China is grappling with a massive COVID wave that has spread uncontrolled since the government ended strict COVID measures. Authorities had been criticized for not revealing enough credible data about the pandemic, and then unexpectedly announced that 60,000 people have died of COVID-related illnesses over the past month. And that's just people at hospitals. It doesn't include those who've passed away at care facilities or at home. The concern now is that it's going to get worse, with hundreds of millions of people traveling again for the Lunar New Year, taking the virus from big cities where infections have peaked into rural areas where populations tend to be older and hospitals have less access to oxygen and drugs. A staggering 900 million people have been infected so far, according to China's own experts, and this second wave could be coming within weeks.
All right. Well, our thanks to Janice for that reporting. Meanwhile, in the U.S., a new variant is dominating COVID cases, XBB.1.5. It's a subvariant of Omicron, and it now accounts for 43% of new COVID infections. That's according to the CDC. And as you can see, it has quickly become the dominant variant in the U.S. Just a month ago, it accounted for less than 8% of cases. So that is a dramatic increase. Joining me now is Dr. Peter Hotez, co-director of the Center for Vaccine Development at Texas Children's Hospital and dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Hotez. We really appreciate it.
Sure. Great to be here.
Let's start in China first. You heard Janice Mackey-Freyer's reporting, China claiming that 60,000 people have died since December. What do you make of that figure? And do you think that the U.S. will ever really have confidence in the numbers and the figures coming from China on this topic?
Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get a lot of transparency out of the Chinese government. If you remember, they first said it was 37 deaths. Now it's 59, 60,000 deaths. Mm-hmm. But, you talk to people at Airfinity, the analytics and data monitoring group out of the UK, and they're coming up with numbers that look like it could be as many as 600,000 deaths, 10 times more by the end of this year. And now we have, as you rightly pointed out, the Chinese New Year, the Lunar New Year coming up. And some of the numbers are just mind-blowing, maybe as many as 32 to 36,000 deaths per day as a consequence of this. And that the worry that, of course, is when people travel to the rural areas of China, I mean, the city hospitals are already easily overrun because the ICU capacity of the urban hospitals is a fraction of what they are in the U.S. or Canada, let's say. But in the rural areas, and oftentimes they're non-existent. So we expect this to continue. And even if the numbers are coming down in some provinces, such as Yunnan province, Henan province, they're going to likely start going up again with the Chinese New Year. And it's a consequence of two major problems: inadequate intensive care unit and emergency room capacity in their health system, and the fact that the vaccines, which were designed against the original lineage, the whole inactivated virus vaccines, are not very powerful or strong to begin with in terms of immune responses, and they seem to offer very little, if any, protection against some of these newer variants.
Well, all of that is incredibly disturbing. Let's talk about this new surge in this new variant here, the XBB 1.5 variant. I have to look at my notes because this is quite a long name for this variant. Talk to us about how virulent this is, and is it easier to contract this variant?
Well, we call the reason you're struggling with the letters is because they all start sounding the same. I sometimes call them the Scrabble variants because they all use high-value Scrabble letters like X, B, and Q, and F. So XBB 1.5 is a recombination virus of probably BA275 and BA212. And the reason it's accelerating now, you mentioned 40% of the cases nationwide. It's about 70 to 80% up in the Northeast, and now it's starting to take off in the Carolinas, North Carolina, South Carolina, where it's about half the cases and 75, 80% in the Northeast. It has some of the immune escape properties of the previous Omicron subvariants, but in addition, it's been modified in a way so that it seems to adhere more tightly to our host ACE2 receptors. So that seems to give it the extra oomph or push to become the dominant Scrabble variant in the United States.
So Dr. Hotez, is it more contagious? Is it more virulent? And do you get sicker with it? Because I've spoken to people who've had it who say, boy, this seems to be a tough variant.
For every time there's a new variant and a new wave, that's the first question people ask: is there a difference in what you call virulence and severity of illness? And that really hasn't panned out with most of the variants. They all seem about the same. But what is pretty clear is this does seem highly transmissible, in part maybe because of this binding to the ACE2 receptor, and the immune escape properties with both translate into that increased transmissibility on what's already quite a transmissible Omicron variant. So it does seem to be taking off. And where it becomes the dominant variant, in the Northeast and the Carolinas, you do start seeing hospitalizations start to go up. Whether this will go through the entire country is still a bit of a mystery. We have seen variants that sometimes stay relatively confined or local. It's not really taking off in the upper Midwest very much. Starting to go up a little bit here in Texas and in the southeastern United States. But that's why we're watching it very closely.
Dr. Hotez, I think everyone is wondering about their booster shots right now. Of course, it was developed for the previous variants. Should people be getting another booster? How effective is the bivalent booster against this new variant?
Yes, I think so. So this bivalent variant, bivalent booster, which has two components, one against the original lineage out of central China, and the one that preceded the XBB, the BA4, the BA5, seems to be close enough that there will likely be some spillover cross-protective immunity. I say likely because the XBB 1.5 is still too new to have actually clinical data in hand, but there are laboratory studies showing that the people who are immunized with the bivalent booster, their antibodies are neutralizing the one that preceded XBB 1.5 XBB. And so I think there is a high likelihood it's going to have some benefit, certainly better than your past monovalent booster. Bottom line, get your bivalent booster.
Okay, we'll leave it on that very important tip there. Thank you so much, Dr. Peter Hotez. We really appreciate your expertise. Coming up after the break, California is still cleaning up. A string of deadly storms has finally tapered off, leaving widespread damage and devastation behind. We are live in one of the areas hardest hit as President Biden prepares to visit the region. That's next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. After 3 long weeks of deadly storms, the forecast finally looks mostly clear for California, clearing the way for President Biden to tour the damage. The president is scheduled to visit hard-hit communities along California's central coast on Thursday. Some areas have gotten more rain in the past 22 days than they normally get in 12 months. Now, as floodwaters begin to recede, the massive cleanup begins. You're seeing a Santa Cruz beach littered with huge chunks of concrete, broken off and carried by the high water levels. There are similar scenes up and down the 900 miles of coast. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin is on the ground in Capitola, California, in Santa Cruz County. Dana, thank you so much for joining us for yet another day. You and I have been talking for several days now about the storm damage and the aftermath. What is happening there today? Can the cleanup finally begin in earnest now that there has been a little break in these storms?
Well, Kristen, first, good afternoon to you. And the good thing is people are starting to clean up. A lot of businesses located here along the beachfront are waiting for some sort of FEMA assistance, but Zelda's on the beach, the restaurant located right behind me. We've seen crews in and out all day, hammering, drilling. They cannot wait because tourism is such a big industry here. The owner is actually using her own money to try to get back up and running, and that's kind of the message that they are putting out there. They want tourists to not forget about them. They have been hit hard by the high waves and debris that came crashing through over the last few weeks, but they are resilient, and that's kind of the message that they're getting out there. We know that the damage has been estimated to be in the billions, at least $1 billion. And this is across the state of California where we have seen flooding, we've seen mudslides, we've seen compromised roads. There's Highway 9 in Santa Cruz County that we visited a few days ago. And the emergency management director tells us that they are worried the road is so compromised just because so much heavy debris has fallen onto that road. So, Kristen, it'll be interesting to see the full scope of this over the next few days and weeks.
And what are the status of the recovery efforts, Dana?
So a lot of people are still trying to figure that out. They were waiting for this one dry day to happen so that people can come in and assess the damage. And that is what they are doing right now. Again, $1 billion at least expected to be the total cost across the state. You mentioned President Biden coming to visit this week. So we hope to find more information after his visit, Kristen.
All right, Dana Griffin, we will look for that reporting from you. Thank you so much for your great work from the ground there. Really appreciate it. Still to come, the fight over abortion rights in Virginia and how it helped Democrats flip a key state Senate seat. I'm going to talk to the senator-elect, a former NFL player who narrowly pulled off the win. That's next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Abortion access was a crucial message for Democrats at the ballot box in 2022, and the issue appears to have just delivered them a key race to start 2023 as well. Last week in Virginia, Democratic City Councilman and former NFL player Aaron Rouse narrowly flipped a key Republican-held state Senate seat in a special election. He did so by campaigning against the 15-week abortion ban being pushed by the Commonwealth's Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin. Here's an ad that Rouse ran on the way to victory.
When I was in the NFL, my job was to be the last line of defense. Right now, that's what we need in Richmond. Extreme Republicans are trying to take away the right to choose in Virginia, rolling back women's freedom to make their own personal medical decisions. I'm Aaron Rouse. Women's rights are on the line. but I'll never back down.
Joining me now, one day before his swearing-in ceremony, is Virginia State Senator-elect Aaron Rouse. Congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us, State Senator.
Thank you for having me here today.
So did that make the difference in the race, your message on abortion, your opposition to the 15-week abortion ban?
Absolutely. I think you can see by my election night into victory that the women and people of Virginia Beach and Norfolk came out decidedly and said, listen, hands off our abortion rights, hands off our bodies. We want to be able to make decisions what's best for them. And women came out in droves, which led us to victory that night.
So do you think the 15-week abortion ban now does not stand a chance of passage in Virginia? What do you think this means?
Absolutely not, or any legislation that would roll back the hands of time in Virginia, where women need to make the decision with their healthcare providers on what's best for them and their bodies. So any legislation that attempts to put in an abortion ban is headed straight to the trash can.
Why do you think that this wasn't consistent in every race? For example, Elaine Laureate didn't work for her race. She fell short. What's the message? What's the takeaway as you look toward 2024? And obviously it gets even tougher in some of those Senate and House races.
Well, I think Congressman Laureate ran a great race. She actually won this district. She actually carried the city of Virginia Beach. But obviously, redistricting played a major role in that. Myself aside, I'm here. I'm a local. I'm a native of Virginia Beach and Norfolk, served on city council for 4 years. And that also helped bring voters out in this special election during a time where there's so much we should be focusing on the economy, public education. But instead, Republicans want to tend to focus on legislating women's and what women do with their bodies.
Well, I want to play you a little bit of what the governor of your state had to say. This was after your election victory. Take a look.
When it comes to unborn children, we can come together. We can choose life and choose to support mothers, fathers, and families in difficult decisions. This session, I have asked the General Assembly to come together to protect life at 15 weeks, the point when a baby can feel pain. It is clear Virginians want fewer abortions, not more.
That's the message that helped him win the governorship. He also walked a very fine line when it came to former President Trump. What is the takeaway for Democrats from the Youngkin victory?
Well, listen, the takeaway for Democrats is we're going to be the party that supports public education. We're the party that's going to put forth an economy that works for everyone. But we're also the party that's going to protect the women's reproductive health care. I think as my victory illustrated that, and it is actually signal to not only women throughout Hampton Roads, but throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, that they don't want people in Richmond or in the General Assembly legislating what they do with their bodies.
And let me just ask you very quickly, do you think that President Biden is going to be the strongest person to represent Democrats in 2024?
Listen, I have my support behind President Biden, and 2024 will take care of itself.
Is that a yes? Is he the strongest person?
Listen, once again, President Biden is doing a great job getting our country back on track. We've seen what he's doing with job growth as well. And so 2024 will be here before you know it. But right now we're in the 2023 session, and we've got to make sure that the governor doesn't roll back the hands of time when it comes to women's reproductive rights.
All right. Well, we're going to have you back on. I'm going to keep asking you that question. State Senator-elect Aaron Rouse, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We do want to turn now to some bittersweet news. Our beloved correspondent Kerry Sanders is retiring after 32 years at NBC News. Kerry crisscrossed the world, traveling to all 50 states and 65 countries, whether he was in front of a courthouse, in the middle of a hurricane, or hanging off the side of a cliff. Kerry approached every single assignment with heart and curiosity, and he had a range unmatched by any other. In Kerry's last live show for the Today Show, he teased his retirement news while reporting on the Mega Millions jackpot down in Florida at the end of last year.
In the 20-year history of the Mega Millions, this $2 bet now for these 5 numbers plus the Mega Ball, it's only reached this 5 other times. So, guys, if you don't see me here next year, it's possible that I won. Or maybe I could say, guys, I've already run the jackpot in life.
Well, we have to say we at NBC News all agree that we won the jackpot having Kerry Sanders as a friend and colleague. We are going to miss him. We wish him the very best. And that does it for this hour. Chuck is back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. NBC News Now coverage continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.